Welcome to this session on developer tools. I am Lars Hammer, architect on NAV, and this is Gert Robbins. I hope I spelled it correct, but anyway, he's the guy who fixes all the bugs that I create. And in the meantime, does a little application development also. So today's agenda is all about code that runs. We do have a few slides to explain what we're doing, but we want to basically showcase a set of features that we're adding to NAV 7 to help integrate the existing tooling into externally developed tooling helper applications, if you will. And we're also going to showcase one of those, namely the one that we have called DevBase, which we're using internally in Microsoft, not currently releasing, but it's utilizing all of these new knobs and the interfaces that you can now get at. And as we said in the abstract, you should basically look at this as a new set of opportunities and see how are we doing this at Microsoft and what can you think about how can you utilize this in the day-to-day operations when you move on to 7. So we'll be highlighting the server management capabilities that are exposed in a DLL that can be accessed through PowerShell. We'll be accessing it from a CAL application. We'll showcase these integration enhancements for C-side, and we'll use those to actually show you an automated build. So what is an automated build? It's something that's common in software development practices where you have your source for your application, and every day you actually grab all of the source and build your application from scratch. So that's a common best practice in software engineering. The automated build that we'll be showing today actually starts on a released, well, not released because we are on 7, but eventually it would be a released database of a specific country version and then building on top of that. So that's our automated build for this demo. We'll also be testing the code that's in this application that we built, and we'll also be utilizing the new debugger, which was also shown in the keynote. Yes, and then we'll also show this internal stuff for you. So the first demo is about a sample add-on that's utilizing this PowerShell extension for server management for NAV, and we'll show you how to automate the build process, how to test it and debug it, and this thing will be developed on top of the FR database that we currently have for 7. Take it away, Gert.
Thank you. So over here we have DevBase, the little tool we have built on the RTC. Over here I have the source code for our add-on, which is a bunch of new objects and a page and a table from the base application that we modified. And over here I have my command prompt. So first I'd like to show you what the French database looks like in standard. So my server, see, demo got. So I think my server went down. No, it did not. That's why. See, demo got. So I have to start up the tool again. Now it should work.
So basically what you see here is a list of the countries that this tool is loaded with, the different versions of the application. And we're going to pick the standard French one and actually launch the role center for that.
So it'll take a little while to start up because it's the first time we're opening this database. So it had to compile all the C# code.
Yes. So and internally in Microsoft, when we do application development, of course we have all of the countries in that list there that we are working on.
Yep. So this is the role center for small business president. It's unmodified. This is what it looks like. And when we build our add-on, in this area, we'll add a few queues that shows us which NAV servers are installed on this machine, and we can see how we can look at the setup and that kind of thing. So I'm going to close this down and run the build script.
And on the right hand side here, we basically have a list of the object files that go into this add-on.
Yep. So the first thing we do is remove the server. Then we build the add-on, and now we recreate the server and start it up. There we go. So now if I open the role center again, again, it'll take a little while. It has to compile all the application.
Yes, and one thing you can notice in the meantime is that we've actually got page 9073 and table 9060 in the list for the add-on. Those are existing objects that has been modified. So they're already in the database, but we have modified versions of those here. And then for the rest of the objects you saw, they're all new objects, part of the add-on.
So now you can see our little add-on. We added some queues. So we have 2 installed servers. Both of them are running. None are stopped. We can have a look at them. So we have a server that's running DevBase, our little tool, and we have the other server that's running the French, running on the French database. And we can have a look at the settings. So we can see the port number, the server instance, the database it's running on. And this is all done calling into the management DLL and retrieving the information. We also have a test to check that our add-on works, which we can get to by opening the C side, which we do from within DevBase. Now I have to get our test. So our test is very simple. It's just for the demo. We have a setup function that retrieves the instance that we're running on. So we get the server name. Then we refresh the data. So we call into the management DLL and get all the servers. And then we go and validate that we can actually find the server that we are running on and that it is actually running. And when I run this, it should pop up over here that we did find ourselves. So it's a little test. So our add-on is running. So now I'm going to close this down and show you how we build it. So I have a copy of the script that has some pause statements in it, so we can follow step by step what's going on. Yes?
Yep, we're ready.
The first step is very simple. We clean up a build folder. This is where all the logs get stored, and we just want to get a clean start. So the next thing we do is we actually remove the server. So there's no more French server now. The next step is we drop the database. So our database is now gone. In this step, we have a zip file that contains the MDF, which contains the standard French database, unmodified. So now we've unzipped that. And using SQL command, we attach it to the SQL server. And because we don't have a log file, SQL is nice enough to create one for us, which is why we get this warning message.
So far the build script has been about getting to a known state, which is what you do initially in a build script, right? So that you know you're starting from the exact same position each time you build. And up until this, none of the artifacts that go into this process are likely to change as you go about the development of your add-on. But still it's important to get to a clean slate and known state each time you do a daily build.
So in this step, we set up some security in the database so that the network service can actually access the database. And this is an important step for our add-on. We copy the management DLL to the FinSQL location and to the server location so that we can compile it and we can run it. So in this step, we just concatenate all of our objects into one big file so that it's easy to import. And now we import the objects using this new finsql command.
Yes.
That's
So
what we do.
that's actually the first enhancement that we're showcasing here, that you're able to remote control C-side to do the import.
Yep. So in this step, we're compiling all the objects. And it would take a very long time to compile all the objects in the database. So we've added this filter so we only compile the uncompiled objects to save some time in this case, and because we know we're not affecting anything else in the application. So we added a bit of scripting to check the error log to see if there's any errors in there. In this case, there aren't any, so we're good. So now we have to recreate our service. So we have 2 config files which are pre-configured for the French database and the French server. So we're copying those to the right location, creating the server, and starting it. There we go.
Cool.
And we're done. So now we can have a look and see that our add-on actually built correctly.
Mm-hmm.
It's taking
Yeah.
longer
So
than last.
how many people are actually using a daily build in their software development? Yeah. So
Not
a
too
few
many.
guys, but not everyone. So there's maybe something that's interesting for you guys to think about here. It's up until now there hasn't really been a supported way of doing that with NAV, so that might be the explanation for the relatively few hands we saw raised. So that's one of the goals of the 7 release, is to actually give you guys a supported way of doing stuff like daily builds. Okay. So that's odd.
We still have 2 installed servers, but something must have happened because we only have 1 running server.
Oh.
And
So what?
it's the dev-based one. So something went wrong because we're running on the French server, but it's not showing up.
Okay.
So, you know.
Yeah. That's
The
a mysterious
demo
bug,
gods
right?
are unkind.
So I think,
So
but as usual, you're going to fix it, huh?
yes. So I think I want to rerun my test.
Yeah, that's a good idea, right? I mean, that's kind of the point of having an automated test,
Yep.
that you actually run it. Now, you can also add a step to your build script that will automatically execute the tests. We want to do a live demo here, so we didn't include that.
So my test is failing. And instead of having the state running, value is bug.
So there is a bug.
There is a bug.
Right there.
So obviously you went behind my back and changed the code while I was rebuilding it.
Yeah, see, that
You
sometimes
or somebody else.
that sometimes does happen when you are many developers on the same project. Between 2 builds that you're running, somebody else has actually checked some code into your source control system, and as part of the build, you actually grab the recent version and put it together, and there's a bug in it.
So I'm going to start the debugger, which, unlike in the keynote, we started from within DevBase, which should show up my session. This is the one I want to debug. And I'm going to set a break because I want it to stop straight away as I run my test. Which has... There we go. So now we can run through the steps and see where this bug is. So I'm just going to single step through all of it. Here we go into the code that will call into the management DLL. So I'm going to step over executing the DLL in this case. And I'm sure you've all noticed
What the bug is?
this is where we have a bug. So one of the nice things is the call stack. So we can go back in the call stack and actually see values that were present when we went back.
So
we
now you can actually inspect values
Yep.
in previous steps in the call stack, not just
Exactly.
the current one.
Yes, which is
Kinda
very nice
useful.
feature. Yep.
Thank you for letting us steal that, Thomas.
Yep. So in this case, I think it's quite obvious what I have to go and fix, right?
Yes.
I'll just
Did you want to do the watch thingy?
Oh, you want to see the watch window? Well, I can rerun this and debug it again. Let's just do.
So we're
that
just
again.
running it once again.
Nope. Yes, my
There it
break.
is.
Actually, forgot to set the break before, so I have to do it again. Now I'm gonna break.
That's the great thing about software. It also runs the third time you tell it to.
Yes.
Unlike some other artifacts you come into contact with.
Yes. So. Okay, I think it went.
Yeah,
Nope.
here we are. Oh, so
Yeah,
now
it went
passed
past
it
the
again.
exercise already. So.
Let's just say that you can add watches.
No.
Maybe
I
you should
want to
set a
do this.
breakpoint actually on the refresh call. Right there.
That one.
Yeah.
Yep. You can do that. So you can. There's keyboard shortcuts for this as well. For those that didn't see what I did. So
Now
let's
we're
see whether
running.
it stops where we want it to stop. Well, that's because I had the break. There we go.
Yeah.
So we're interested in the. It's not there yet.
No, you have to go into. And
So now I want to see the states, right?
Yeah.
There we go. Which is currently empty. Still empty. There we go.
so lo and behold,
Yes,
now when you run, that's the buggy line
that's
of code.
yes. So let's go fix this bug. Right?
Yes.
So there's no magic there. I know it's in the refresh, so I'm going to use go to definition to go straight to where I want to fix the code. Remove the buggy code. Save that. Go back here, rerun my test, which still breaks.
Mm-hmm.
And now it works again.
Whoa. See, he is fixing the bugs.
I think with that,
Yep.
back to you.
So, what did we see here? This is a picture that shows you the physical configuration, if you will, on Red's machine as he was going through this. On the left-hand side, we have got the DevBase application, and as you can see, it has all of the standard components that you'll find in any NAV application. It's got its own database that, of course, contains the objects for the DevBase application, and then it has a couple of tables that knows about the list of objects that go into the other applications that we had listed, and what countries do we actually have in there, and so on. That's all stored in that central database. And then the logic, which obviously runs in the DevBase server, does sort of the orchestration task for us. So it talks to csite, the finsql.exe, and asks that to maybe import stuff and export stuff to our directory. It can also invoke the RTC for running stuff, and it also can actually instantiate databases and servers on our behalf. So the way that we see this tool is sort of like an orchestration engine. So this is where this is sort of the cockpit for your development, where you go in and start and have the overview of, in our case, all of the countries, in your case, all of the projects that you have inside of here. So one of the things that we actually did was exercise the command line extensions here. And you are probably all familiar with the existing command line options that you have when you launch Seaside, like you can pick a database and you can pick a company. What we're adding now is a set of commands that allow you to do stuff like create a database and create a company and so on. We didn't do that in our build script because we were starting off of the French release database. We did showcase import objects, compile objects. We can also export objects. We didn't do that here. We get back to design object later that allows you to actually invoke Seaside. Once you specify these objects, you can specify a filter so that you don't have to compile all of the database. We saw that. We just said compile equals no in here. You also specify the input file, and then you have this log file, which we use to check in our automated script. And these are some concrete examples from our build script. So import, and this is actually, we've cut out a little part of the path, but otherwise this is exactly what ran when we were importing and compiling objects. So you see it's very straightforward command line interface. Then we actually launched the designer from within Seaside, and we do that using .NET interop, so we call out to a .NET class. So what happens is we have this helper function here called start Seaside, and we pass in what package. Package is the dev base slang for what country and so on. So we have a package for W1, we have one for France, we even have one for dev base, and we have so that's what we pass in. And then what happens inside of here is we get the setup, which will include stuff like where do I actually find Seaside, and we also build a set of connection arguments, which is exactly what server, what database, and what company do I want to launch Seaside on. And then in the case of just opening Seaside, we have no extra arguments. So we end up calling this helper code unit process management.start, which is basically start an external process. And inside of there, we're using a couple of types from the CLR, the .NET runtime library, namely process and process start info, and we basically fill in the process start info with the file name and the arguments, and say this is the info for our process, and then we start it. So that's an example of .NET interop. So this is what you actually saw happening when we hit open the Seaside designer from within DevBase. And of course you could have clicked the icon on the desktop, but what database would that point to, and what company would it actually run in, and so forth. So again, this is the philosophy of trying to create a tool that becomes your cockpit in your day-to-day development. Then we also were utilizing the the server management DLL, and it is designed to actually work within PowerShell so that you have these commandlets that you execute. What I'm showing you here is actually, again, a bit of .NET interop. So we're using our DLL, and this is the name of the DLL, and this is the PowerShell helper. So we're invoking things through this class here. And then we need to have a collection to actually get access to the results that come out of that. So let's look at what happens inside of this execute commandlet. That's a wrapper function for... No, sorry. Let me back up a second. So this is actually calling the commandlet, and we're getting the results out here. So let me show you in a little more detail how we're actually using that when we get this is just for getting the list of servers, and you will have similar code when you look inside of the add-on that Red showed. So what you'll notice is we call this execute commandlet, and we call this particular commandlet get nav server instance. In PowerShell, the protocol is that you build all of your responses up as an XML document. And so that's the bit of code that we have here. First we clear the nav server table. And then we execute the commandlet. And then if we did get results back from it, we are creating a stream and saving the result into that stream. And now we can use an XML port to actually import into this table. So that's what is happening here. And if you're coding against PowerShell commands, this is the pattern that you're using. And we have right after lunch we have a session on, not we, but our colleague Stefan has a session on managing servers through this component. And you can do this is just a short list of what you can do using that, creating and starting and stopping and getting to the server settings as we saw. And it also deals with things like license files. Then we showed the debugger, and just going a little bit into what is actually happening when you are debugging. You have any number of normal client sessions that are running. You can also have these background sessions that Thomas talked about in the keynote. And then you create a specific debugging session for which you attach a debugging client. And it's actually through that, through working across these sessions, that the debugger does its magic, if you will. The core reason why we can actually debug a single session while the other sessions that are active on the server keep running is that the debugger is based on instrumenting the code that we actually execute. So before each statement that we're going to execute in AL, there's a call to a function called statement hit that tells the debugger infrastructure, now we are thus far in the program execution. The debugging engine is going to just look at a Boolean flag. Is anybody debugging, yes or no? And if nobody's debugging, it's just exiting so that you pay virtually no overhead in that case. If you do have a debugging session, then we're going to call into that, basically pause your execution, call into that, and have that debugging session decide what to do at this point. Like, do I have a breakpoint? Is there an error? And all of this good stuff, and that's communicated back to the debugging client. Now, the debugging client is really a page, as you probably saw from the look and feel of it. It's just a page that has some parts on it, and one of the parts is actually talking to this specific debugging session. So that's kind of the magic part that you have to have in this page in order to make this debugging infrastructure work. So then we also showed you very quickly as an example of an automated test. We just had a single test case in there. Obviously you will in general you will have many test cases within each of your test code units. You also saw that the results pop up on the screen. So that's the default behavior of a test code unit to support you as a developer as you develop your tests and get immediate feedback. If you want to automate the execution of a suite of tests, which is likely what you would do at the end of your daily build script, you create another type of a code unit which is called a test runner, which is designed to pick up the results from each test case as it executes and maybe write it to a table or into a log file. That's entirely up to the person writing the test runner. Then the last thing I want to mention here is that in the current bits that we have released in R2, you are actually not able to execute page logic through the testability framework. That is added now. We call it page testability, which means that the actual engine of the client is running and calling all of the triggers that you have added to your page, but it's doing so without a physical UI. And that's another advantage of this single client architecture that was presented in the keynote, namely that we can sort of say we have a test display target, which is not really rendering anything. Instead, it's talking actually to the test that is executing on the server. So from there, you will have access to all of the controls, and you can set values and so forth. So you can really exercise your pages through this. And our good colleague Bas has a session tomorrow, also in this room, on best practices for how to do test automation. So if you're interested, you might want to visit that. So let's go on to demo number 2. And we've created this add-on on the French database. Wouldn't it just be nice if we could actually take the add-on and move, say, to Spain?
Yes. So the first thing I'm going to do is get our add-on into DevBase. So for that, I need to create a new package, which is quite simple. Make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to give it a name, a label. And needs a namespace. So
now we're not working for Microsoft, we're working for Kronos in the NAV business, right? That's why we chose that namespace.
So our add-on is currently running on the French database, so I'm going to pick that. I'm going to add the service, which we're using the management DLL to get that information, get the port number right. Then that is because the package was not created. So I need a company, which we're reading directly from the database using SQL. And of course, I'd like to get the correct role center when I open this up. And I need a place to store my new add-on. So in here, I'll go and create a new folder. Call that server management. And since our add-on is built on the French database, I'm going to give it a reference to that French database so that it knows which objects are part of France and which ones are new. So now that I have all of this set up, I can do this action, which will go and read from the database and figure out which are the objects that I modified and pull them into DevBase. So this is the worksheet. So I can see all of my new objects, which I want to add as an object. And the page and the table I'm going to add as a modification, which is a new concept that DevBase introduces, which will capture the difference between the standard object in France and what I have. So I'd like to go and sync that to disk.
Yeah, so basically we were looking at the state of the objects inside of that C-side database that we pointed to, the modified French one, and we looked at all of the modified objects in there for creating this list for the worksheet.
So I guess you're all interested in seeing what this modification looks like, so we can open it up and have a look. So the modification looks exactly like any other NAV object with some differences. One difference is it has a target, so it actually points to another object. And in this case, we've inserted some controls, a new queue group, the installed servers control, the running servers, the stopped servers. And on the unopened page trigger, we've added a new variable, and we've modified some code. So we can see the old code, and here's the new code in which we've added this refresh. So that's the change that we did. If we look at the table, what we did, we added 3 new fields. And that's that. So now that we, this screen, now that we have this modification and the new objects in DevBase, we can go and port that to wherever we want. In this case, to Spain. Now with a little magic, what will happen is we get a new package, which stands alone. So this is now a full object again. It's a table. It's not a modification anymore. This is a page. All of this information has been copied from Spain. So I think I'd like to export this. So not on the, no, I did it again. I want my C drive. So I'm going to create a new folder for that and call it Spain. There we go. And I'm going to export. So now I have all my stuff on disk again, and we have a copy of the build script that we used earlier. The only difference is now it's pointing to the ES folder and not the French folder. So I can build it. So as you can see, we didn't have a Spanish server, so it can't remove it, can't drop the database because we didn't have one, but it can attach the new one, concatenate all the files, and there's an error.
Oh, so it got all the way to the point where it was actually compiling these modified objects inside of the Spanish version of the application, and then it failed with some compilation error. And we were actually able to pick that up in the build script.
Yep. So if anybody's worked with the Spanish database before, everybody will know this is a conflict with Cartera controls. So we want to go and fix that, right?
Yep.
So we'll open up the Spanish package. We know it's in page 9073. And I hit this design, which takes me right into the designer for the page. So one of my new controls got a conflicting ID. It's this one. I would rather not have conflicting IDs. So if I change it and just close Seaside and save, now my database is okay, but my files on disk are not. So I'm going to sync, which will figure out that I've changed this page. I want to move that to my hard drive, which I've done. And now I'll try and build it again. And hopefully this time it will work.
Let's see. So once again, cleaning up and getting the fresh copy of the standard Spanish one and importing. And now we've actually no compilation errors.
So let's have a look and see if that worked. So now we're opening the Spanish database, hopefully with our add-on. Again, compilation takes a little
while. We've just
while.
created the server, and it needs to compile basically the C# code for all of the application objects that it's touching. And there's the add-on.
So here's our add-on, now with 3 running servers. And it is Spain. We have our Cartera stuff down there. And we can go and look at the servers that we have. Spain, France, DevBase. That looks good.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Back to you.
And that's for you. So, what does the configuration look like now on the box? Well, we've got another directory, and we've got a Spanish database in play now, and we've also got a Spanish instance of the server, and both of which can be accessed through the RTC. And now you begin to see where this picture is going as you work on multiple projects, and why it's kind of useful to have an application that actually orchestrates that. Another thing that you might have noticed is that, or which I want to emphasize, is that we're really surrounding Seaside with this new development tool. And still, whenever you go and actually work with a concrete object, you're in Seaside. No change there. So all we're doing is we are opening up Seaside so that we have a supported way of interacting with it. And that's what allows us to actually enrich the experience as a developer on Seaside through external tools. And this is one of the cases where we do say, go do this at home. So this is a variation of what we did before when we were actually opening Seaside. Now we're designing a particular object, so we are still passing in what package we're in so that we can figure out what database and what service and all of that. But now we're also adding a couple of parameters to the design object command line option, and we're passing in the type and the ID of the object. As it happens, if you pass in 0 here, then that's going to cause Seaside to open the designer for that type on a new object. So you can remote control that as well. And then this stuff is what we've already seen. We take that and we add the connection arguments and actually start the process. And then we also previewed a few of the concepts inside of this internal DevBase tool. We saw modifications, and all that they are doing is really figuring out what's the difference between two versions of the same object. And as you saw, we can capture that and store it in a format that's very similar to any of the other object types that you know. And then we can take the modification and apply to a different baseline, which is exactly what happened for Spain. You also saw that when we apply that, DevBase might be happy, but when it comes to actually taking that modified object and compiling it at Seaside, you might still get errors. And on top of that, you still might get functional errors, right? It's not a given that the add-on that you're porting will just automatically work, because there might be other differences that the add-on would depend on, other than the ones that you can see by compilation. I think everybody has been in those situations. So basically, we're supporting all of the structure and the properties and the code that you can have in an application object. We don't yet have a good story for the RDL. So that's just the current state of this concept. And then we also saw packages and references, and the key point here about the references is that that's actually what gives you the offset. We had this set of objects, but we have to tell the tool that these objects should really be compared against the French baseline, because otherwise you can't figure out what objects are modified and what are new ones, and compute the modifications. So that's what we saw. Now you guys might be thinking that's all great and it works in the future once we're all on 7 and all of this good stuff. Now the fortunate thing with NAV is we're always doing our utmost to protect your investment, which you've made over the years. And therefore, Seaside has always been as backwards compatible as we have possibly been able to manage, right? So in this case, we can actually take this add-on and move it even back in a release. And we're going to actually try and move it back into the Belgian release from R2. And why did we pick Belgium?
I don't know. I think. Well, because we are in Belgium. That's why.
That's why. Yes.
So it's basically the same procedure we did before. I go to my server management with the modifications. I go, let's port this to Belgium, right? Which is an R2. Say okay, get a little magic. And here we are in R2. Now, I want to save this. Let's see if I can find my C drive. And
you're getting the hang of it.
Yeah. So, Belgium. And I'll go and export that. That seems to have worked. So, now when we go to Belgium, we can see our code is here. There's actually a slight difference between 7 and R2 here. In R2 there's an extra line of code here, but we've managed to merge that in. And we get our new controls, which still have the old ID, because we only fixed that in Spain. And we get all the Dutch and French captions. So, now, in R2, we can't build it the same way we did for 7, because we don't have the command line. So we're going to have to build it manually, right?
Yep.
So I have a little version of the script which does the steps that we can do in R2, which is just going to attach a new database and set up the server. So this is a clean server. I think just doing a little upgrading because we're actually using a slightly more recent release of R2, which has some hotfixes into it. So it upgraded the database automatically, which is nice. And now we have a server running B. So we can go and open the object designer, which is R2. I don't know if you saw it flash. It doesn't open the actual object designer because FinSQL doesn't know about that command, but it does open. And now I need to go and import my objects. So I have a second little script, which will just concatenate the objects for me, because it's kind of annoying to have to do that manually. So I can import. There they are. This, by the way, is the folder I just created, just so you know. So they all import. I'll do the same thing, just compile the non-compiled objects, get all of those. And here's an error. Our test, which we can have a look at, it uses this active session table, which doesn't exist in R2, so we won't be able to run our test.
That's too bad.
Yep, that's too bad.
Yeah.
So now that we've compiled all the objects, we can try and run R2.
Yeah. So we've actually built the application from the modifications and the new objects in the exact same process, although a few of the steps needed to be manual because we are now using the R2 version of Seaside.
Yes.
And we're also using...
Thing is, .NET Interop works slightly differently in R2, which actually makes our DLL fail. So
yes.
We can backport the objects, but for this particular add-on, it won't run. So not to leave you hanging with a bug, we can run it again in France and see that in our French add-on, it will actually pick up the R2 server. So now we have 4 running servers, and there's Belgium running on R2 with our lovely internal build number. Right?
Cool. So we were actually able in this demo to port the add-on back to R2, and there were some manual steps that we needed to do because we don't have this automation interface in R2, and there was even an issue with the newly NAV 7 management DLL that it didn't quite run in the R2 context. But the overall concept should be there. And this is just completing the picture. Now we have the Belgian 2009 R2 stuff added, and now we also need a new client, right? Or a node client, if you will. So you kind of get the big picture here. So just to recap on the modifications, the intention is to be able to basically compute the modification between any 2 versions of objects and take that anywhere you want to go. And we've used it for regulatory features, and we believe you can use it basically for any of your development once we get so far as to release it. Okay, that's it for our demos, and we look sort of good on timing. So let's go into the recap. What was it that we saw here? Well, we saw the Seaside command line extensions exercised, a couple of them up there, and a couple of ones that we didn't exercise in italics. We showcased the PowerShell administration add-in, which you can server administration add-in, which you can learn more about. We showed you a little bit of test automation in addition to the automated build, and then basically the overall theme or message or whatever you want to call it is that role tailor tooling is the way that we're headed. And with the 7 release, we're not actually replacing Seaside. Seaside is still in there, but we are giving you the opportunity to actually orchestrate that and create a role-tailored application that can actually do that. So all of the add-on tools that I know you guys use in your day-to-day processes can actually be ported onto the RTC, and you can create an NAV application to assist you in your day-to-day work. And we will make sure by consuming this internally that you can actually close the loop. And we are very serious about that. We are actually using this process internally in our application development going forward in order to get rid of all of the bugs, so that we can have Gert do something else than fix my bugs. Here's a few pointers. I've mentioned the next session after the lunch and also tomorrow's session on test automation. And there's also a link where you can go to Mibusu and find out more about testing for NAV. There's an entire tool set for testing the application up there. With that, we'd like to take questions and hopefully provide answers. There any questions? If so, please raise your hand and the mic will be delivered. Maybe you can hand it up through the rows.
I saw on the command line that you had added an option to import objects from command line.
Yes.
To my idea, it might be very useful to send the object to the customer and have him running the import. But I noticed that you were importing TXT files.
Yes.
Which normally the customer can't import with his license.
Yes.
Do you have a solution for that?
Yes. Give it a FOB file.
The import also works with FOBs, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So next question down here. So while we are on the topic of deploying solutions to customers, it is not the intention with the modification concept that you can build a FOB file with your add-on and then just take it from France and just shove it into Spain and think that it'll run. As we saw, this is really a developer process that you need to go through, and you need to fix the bugs that might be in there. Yes.
What can we expect from the prototype? I mean, in the future, will it be part of NAV 7 or just after it? Or
so currently, we don't have any release plans for the prototype, which means that you can, when the 7 releases, you can do all of what you saw in demo 1, right? All of the automated build and test and all of that you can do. All of the orchestration that you saw, the complicated pictures with the many databases and many servers, all of that you can do. But for now, you'll have to build your own tool. And we don't actually know exactly when we'll be ready to ship this notion of a modification and roll it out. It's certainly the intention. We want to harness it internally first. So that's the best non-answer I can give at this point. More questions?
Hello. I was wondering if there was any future or current intention of integrating version control as in Visual Studio integration with Team Foundation Server.
So what we do in our internal development is that we use this mechanism to export a file and import a file per object, and then we have a source control system that actually picks up those files. So that's the mechanism that we use ourselves. Inside of the dev-based tools, we've actually created some helpers for that. So for instance, when you hit design on an object, we can go and check it out for you. And so there's little integration like that in the internal tool. So that again, that means you can go do that. The tool that you saw is all built in application logic. So so once we do ship it, you will be able to customize it and so on. But I can't speak of concrete release plans. But it's certainly possible to integrate source control. Another question?
Hello, just one simple question. I saw that you've managed to show when we are going through the stack in debugger, we can see the values of the variables before. Now, did you manage to do the same for the members of an array?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, thank you.
Can we dim the lights a little bit? Because now we're that far back in the room that I'm actually blinded. Can't see the person who's supposed to... Or was there another question up there?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
You showed us that we can select a session in a debugger. And my question is if I can select someone else's session, some other user.
And the answer to that is yes, you can.
Okay, thank you.
So we require a developer license, but as a developer you can basically get access, yes. So there's an add-on to that answer. I'll just pick it up. Yes, so from a security perspective, what you can do is you can, in your configuration, lock down debugging. So if you have like a running system, your system administrator might say, you're not allowed to debug on this thing. And then you'll have to get in touch with him to actually unlock it. Was there another question?
Yes, there is another question.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't see you because of the light. Yeah.
I'm in the back in the dark. So.
Yes.
About saving the delta of the modifications.
Yes.
Will it be multi-level? So the modifications your customer has made to the same object you have made customizations to, will it be on a different level?
Yes. So the answer lies in packages and references. If you imagine that you have a package for the W1 version, which we actually had in here, we didn't showcase it, then you have a package for, say, the French version, which is in itself technically an add-on to W1, right? So that's two levels of packages. And then as an ISV, you may create this management add-on, and maybe you customize that for your customer in the concrete installation. So you actually now have 4 levels of packages. And the trick is that you use these dependencies or references between the packages to actually set this whole thing up. So basically what you can do is you can build any arbitrary graph, acyclic graph of packages that are dependent on one another. And at each level you can have the package contain a modification for an object in a downstream package. It doesn't matter if that object has been further customized in the lower layers, so to speak. Once it gets time to apply your package, it will look at a set of full objects and apply your modifications. So an important thing to note is that you can also, instead of converting your stuff to modifications, if you prefer to work as until now, you can actually use full objects in the package. So instead of actually computing the difference between the standard version of the role center page and the modified one, you can just decide to store the modified one in your package, and the logic will still just, instead of actually applying and going through all that engine, just do a raw copy of your modified full object. Did that answer the question?
He says yes.
Thanks. So next question, please.
Yes, I have a question regarding your localizations. Are they also, did you spend some work on it to clean them up against each other? I mean, you got the compile error, then when I have 2 controls, I get a compile error, only 1 control. But if I compare the localizations, and if you have to deal with a lot of them, especially in the Asian countries, they sometimes do their own number range, and suddenly you have the same field twice with maybe different functionality on it.
So we are in the process of looking at that, and that's one of the things that we think that this tool can help us with internally, and also one of the problems that we're going to use it for that will help harness it before it actually gets released. So the answer is we're doing that. We haven't done it.
Super, thanks.
Next question.
And about localization, there is a well-known problem about importing text files. For example, I have a big customized table with just one new localized field. And I can't import the text file because the number range of the field is of the localization, and my developer license don't allow me to import it. So is it solved? Can it be worked around? Well, there are workarounds with fobs, but I don't know about these TXT files.
Yeah, so now you're getting into how do we actually use the license files to protect the IP of our partners, and I don't think the story is perfect yet, but I don't think we're going to fundamentally change that. If you as a partner get a range of IDs, that's yours to work in, and it will not automatically be accessible to other partners.
No. So the only workaround is the current workaround, which is use a fob to merge in the new fields, and then once you have the new field in, then go and do a textual merge of your files, fix it all up again, and then you'll be able to import the text file. And that's the way it works now, and I think that's the way it'll stay.
Okay.
Well, the automatic build is based on the text files, so your text files need to be okay. Yes, you can. You have to update your text files first so that they contain the new field already. Yes, but you won't be able to build your R2 add-on directly onto 7 without some manual work. So first, you take your R2 add-on, you fix it up in 7, and you export those files, and that you will be able to build. You won't be able to build your R2 add-on onto 7, for example. I mean, you'd be very lucky if that works.
On your tool, the developers-based tool, how are you handling multi-language layers? Usually we find if we're mixing Swedish and Danish databases that it'll always turn up as being differences because of the multi-language layers.
Yes. So we have an easy solution for that. We don't have language layers in our source code.
So you don't have any language layers in the French on the Belgian database?
Well, in these examples, we do. But if we go and look in our source control system, there'll be no language layer there. It gets added by the build automatically. And you will be able to do that. We haven't mentioned it here. But
yes, there are command line options to actually import a language module and export a language module. So that's what we're using internally. If you noticed, well, I think you would have a hard time, but actually in the French and the Spanish database that we were exercising here, there were no multi-language captions because these are internally built. In the Belgian database from R2, we actually took one that had been shipped and contained the captions.
No, the captions were in there. They were. We're just running English demo data. So the data was in English, but the captions were in those databases. But
next question. So over here, please.
You talked a lot about importing, exporting text files from the developer tools. Is it possible to export a package as a FOB file?
No, it is by design not possible to export a package, because as we saw, when you take that package to a different context, there might be errors, right? So in the first case, there was actually a compilation error. In the next case with Belgium, it all compiled fine because the Belgian database does not contain criteria fields, so we didn't have that issue, right? So it all compiled fine, and we were actually able to run it, and nothing was crashing. Well, but the actual functionality of the add-on did not work in the R2 context. So the point here is that as you take such a package and apply it in a different context, it's really your responsibility as a developer to get all around any of the issues that there might be. It cannot be automated. So that's why we deliberately picked some scenarios here that actually fail, because they will fail in real life. So, and that also means that this is not sort of a mechanism for magic, I shouldn't say magic, but for automated update of regulatory fixes, and you can't use this as a rollout. It's simply too complicated because of the differences that there are between installed databases, right?
So there is, once you have your new database and you fixed all these errors, you can write a command that will export those objects into one FOB file.
Yes,
But that would be after you fixed all the bugs and all the issues.
So basically, as a developer, you need to have the target database, and then of course you can create a FOB and deploy as you're used to, using the new command line features. More questions?
Yes, so you mentioned this new type of object, modification. Is it somehow exportable, or how do you get that type of object? And will it be in the version 7? Because you mentioned that DevTool will not be available. So
right, yeah, so that's exactly it. No, modifications will not be in version 7. So the notion of a modification, even though it looks and feels, I shouldn't say smells, right?
No.
Even though it looks and feels like any of the other Seaside objects, Seaside doesn't have a clue about this. So that has to be dealt with on the outside, in this case by this DevBase tool. So what physically happens is that DevBase has a representation of the base object. In this case, let's pick the Spanish role center page part that we were modifying, and then it has this representation of the modification, and internally it merges the two, or applies the modification, and then it exports the modified object to a text file. And that text file is then imported into Seaside and compiled, and that's how you can update your database. So that's what's physically going on underneath. So we're not extending Seaside per se with the notion of modifications. That's something that belongs to the tooling. And therefore the answer is the notion of a modification will ship when the tooling ships, for which we have no current plans. I mean, yeah.
And one more small thing. You've done lots of clicking around the new debugger, the tool and everything, because it's all tailored. What about keyboard-driven work? Because, well, so developers do use keyboards.
Oh, yeah. So the reason is this thingy here, because that really means you can't see Red's hands. So therefore, but you can see the moves of the mouse up there. So that's the reason. There are keyboard shortcuts for it all.
Thank you.
Or nearly all.
Nearly.
Well, so the keyboard shortcuts are there. Question is, did they get in here? They're the same as Visual Studio. Yeah. So the question was the shortcuts specifically in the debugger, the keyboard shortcuts, and they are taken from Visual Studio. So it's F10 and F11.
Still F9 for breakpoints.
Pardon?
Still F9 for breakpoints.
Still F9 for breakpoint, yeah. Yes,
question. In the debugger, as you showed, there was an error and you wanted to change some code. I find it always difficult. Take a pen and a piece of paper because I need the number of the object, whether it's a code unit, a table, or whatever. Copy a piece of code to find back the line of code on where the error occurred. Wouldn't it be very nice if we could just simply in the debugger change the code because it looks quite similar to me?
Oh, so changing the code in that UI really means that you have a design tool inside of the RTC. And that's where we want to go, but we are not there yet. So that's one part of my answer to your question. For now, all design happens inside of Seaside. We haven't built a UI around it. Of course, that's possible because you can build whatever UI and whatever representation of your objects and then just serialize them to text and then you can import them into Seaside, right? So it's possible to do it. It's not in there. What we are looking at is a feature that from the debugger takes you into Seaside on the point where the failure is. So that's the next best thing, which comes before inline editing. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, probably like in the DOS version. Well, you have to get one of these guys who can raise their hand on 24 years tenure to speak about the DOS version, right? When I joined the company, we were actually working on what was called Navigator for Windows, right? So I never actually got to see that. Yes, yes, that is very nice.
Is it possible to create a functionality which allow you to change value in debugger, watch value, in real time?
Yes, it's possible.
It will be very useful.
Yes, you can. So are we shipping that? Is going to be the next question. Which? Okay. Pretty sure. Yeah.
So it will be.
Pardon me. Please repeat the last part of the question. Oh, it wasn't a question. Comment. Next question, please.
No, nobody here.
Excuse me. Can you or will you be able to at one time step back in code? So when you hit an error, you actually change it, go back 2 steps.
So with the debugger technology, that is possible. Not actually step back the execution, but it's possible to play back. Go to any point in your execution and actually play back from there, including variable values and so forth. It is possible with this technology. It does have some resource overhead actually doing it. I mean, you have to basically what you have to store in memory just grows and grows and grows, so that it's not entirely unchallenging to do it. The other thing you have to remember is that your object instances can point to other object instances and so forth. Like if you have something that's referring to code unit 1 and that has, or any code unit, and that has a bunch of members and so on. So pretty soon, if you want to really capture all state, you end up having really a big part of memory that you have to maintain. So if we ever do this, it'll probably be something like only maintaining the state to the first level. And once you decide to do that, it becomes kind of complicated to make sure that you don't traverse any further and that stuff. So it's doable. There are some challenges there of practical nature. So therefore, we don't have any plans to release that as of now. Yeah, so the question is about really debugging not so much code, but properties, and especially for pages. Yeah. So when you are in the page designer and you touch this property and so on, there's a couple of steps that happen before you actually see the page. Yeah. And so the question is about, are there any way of debugging that? And in 7, we're actually releasing the page preview, which allows you to have the page rendered without data in it right next to right next to your Seaside Designer. And it's very well integrated. If you click an action in the page preview, you're actually taking right to the point in Seaside where you can design that action. So specifically that we do have. We could even demo it, but I don't think we have time. So I think we're stealing time from your lunch, guys.
Oh, you have 10 minutes.
Oh, cool.
So I think it works best if I resize it a little so you can see what's going on. And yeah, that's the annoying thing. I have to resize this one. So if you click on these, you can see it move over here, right? So this is maybe not the best page because there's no actions on it, but I can pick another one. Which one has actions? How about this one? So, not really. So you can go through here.
You try it the other way as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, if you go in here, then you can see it highlights over here.
What also would be nice there is if some action is not shown on the page because you did something illegal, wrong image file or anything, that you can
Yes.
do the other way.
Yes. So there is some way to go still with actually compiling the page definition and giving you all of the errors. Yes, granted. So this is what's in, and we also have, basically on a piece-by-piece basis, this compiler rule and that compiler rule and so on added. So we're working on it. This is sort of the biggest step. Will it be perfect in 7? Well, if you can show me perfect software, then. Yeah. More questions?
Yeah, so I'm loving all of this, of course.
So am I.
Yeah. So, but there's of course the issue. Some clients are still running on 260 for sake.
Yes.
So you think it will be a supported scenario for? Well, it's a licensing issue, so perhaps not the correct venue to ask. To do technical upgrades of older databases to use all this magic.
So I'm not sure that a technical upgrade into this in the traditional sense where you just roll in the framework and everything works, because there are no forms anymore in the runtime.
Well,
so
considering it's a 2009 at least RTC implementation, not 260.
Yeah. Well, you can do it. What I would encourage instead is use some of these new concepts, like modification, once we get them out, of course, right? To actually get the definitions of your 260 solution into this tool and start working from there. Basically, what you should be able to do is take the objects from 260 and then take the corresponding objects in whatever version you want to go to and compute the difference between those two. Right now it's a difference between whatever's installed with your customer and what does the latest Microsoft release look like. And then you can start actually dealing with that. So I think the ability to just isolate it, look exactly at what has changed, but you'll see a lot of changes, right? But you can just isolate. So you can use these tools to isolate these changes. The good thing is the text format has not changed fundamentally. The structure of the objects have not changed. In very rare cases only have we discontinued properties from one version to the next. So there's a good chance that you will have a high degree of compatibility between that. So eventually it'll be possible to have modifications that span, great span of releases. So, and that's probably what I would think about, so that you also get to use some of the 7 features once you've gone through this upgrade. If you do a strictly technical upgrade, it's still the same application, right? And you're going to have a hard time backporting all of the regulatory fixes that.
But doing the full-on port would be easier if you already have the technical gizmos and buttons.
I mean, as
and
long as
command
you
line
can
interfaces.
I think so. It's a bit premature since we are not yet releasing this concept of a modification. But I think once you have the ability to represent your 260 object in the tool, and you have, well, basically any object can be represented. An object from any version can be represented. I think that's a big step. So, and I think it's the best answer that we can give you right now if you want to move across that many versions. And I know it's a real problem, so we will be testing it and so on internally also going across.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
You mentioned the text format isn't going away in terms of exporting. What about XML? Because we have a possibility to export objects as XML for forms and reports, I think, but not for the rest of them. For some automated tooling, it would be more convenient to have them as XMLs, as forms, and reports. Any plans on that?
No current plans on that. The reason that we have the XML ports for some of the objects, or XML exports, sorry, for some of the objects, is to support the form transformation process, and maybe that's that sort of tooling that you are talking about. And the other reason is that we actually use XML internally as we move metadata between the tiers. That's not necessarily sort of the ideal solution going forward. So I think what you should expect, and so I don't think you should expect that we will expand the XML format to all of the object types. Thinking ahead, and now again I'm beyond release. I don't know which release this is relevant for, but thinking ahead, you would probably have a programming model instead. So if you're doing things like the form transformation tool is doing, which is basically taking some version of metadata and actually changing it to become a page, and if it's that type of tool, I think you will sooner see a programming model for it than you will see an XML representation. So that means you, instead of writing XSLTs or programs that use the DOM to traverse XML and so on, you will have a strongly typed programming model, like go instantiate the definition of this table, table 18, and dot my way to the list of fields and so forth, and you can write code that transforms your metadata.
Well, actually, the question was more based on upgrades, because if in some cases it's easier to merge the changes when they're in XML than to traverse the text file, so things like this.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, the answer is still kind of the same. The notion of modification is meant to be addressing also the upgrade scenarios, which is very equivalent to what we demoed, right? Yep. There was a question down here on the second row.
I've seen that you still have the form type in the object designer. What can we do with it? Can we design it? Can we see the code? Can we run it? Can we debug it?
So the reason you see the form button in here is because it's an internal build. It's in the 7 release, there won't be any form button.
But when you will do transformation from forms to pages, will you do it in 7, or will you have to go to R2, do the transformation, then put it in
yes,
7?
Transformation forms to pages was done in the 2009 releases, and that's where you will have to go and do that.
Thank you.
Okay, you already introduced the DevBase tool on last year in Munich on the airlift, yes. And I thought it is the most useful and powerful tool that you delivered in the last years. But when will we really have the possibility to get it?
as soon as possible. So we are right now using it internally,
Yeah.
and so we think we need to do that to complete it and make sure
Yeah.
that we don't, because I mean, I know it's hard to imagine with Gert and me on the project, but there's actually sometimes bugs in that code, right? And we
Your code, maybe.
Oh yeah. Okay. so as soon as you take me off the project, we'll be able to release it.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. I don't have a good answer.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, right now we're using it internally, and we do that because we want to harness it, and because we have advantages from it, obviously also. But we want to harness it and get it to a place where it has the shipping quality that we want to. And then there's also a question of the bandwidth to support this tool, right? We have, as was also mentioned in the keynote, we have a bunch of things on our plate that we need to make a success for this release, and that's what we're focusing on. And DevBase is further down the line. Thanks for asking, though. Keep asking that question. Keep asking it.
Some internal comparison tools for DevBase, or do you use some .NET comparison?
So what we do when it comes to, so DevBase does the comparison itself when it comes to values of properties and walking the structure, and it find out that we have added these controls and we have changed this property and so on. It does that internally. When it comes to looking at code, what we do is we export what was the code before and what was the code after the change and what's the new version of the code. And that's becomes then a three-way merge scenario for which we can use standard tools. And what we've done in DevBase is we've actually we have this table of external tools, and in there you say my three-way merge tool is going to be this command line, right? So we are actually using the three-way merge capabilities in our own source control system, which is an internal Microsoft thing that a lot of people are using internally. But I mean, there are tools out there that can do three-way merges that are accessible, and so you just plug in that tool to DevBase. So that's the philosophy in general. Even though we are using DevBase internally only for now and targeting that, we try to make it pluggable so that we are thinking about the day when we give it out to you when you have a slightly different infrastructure.
One question: the Dev Toolkit will no longer be supported.
Correct.
What will be the tool after that for us, from your side?
So something based on DevBase is my best guess. Currently, the prototype has been focusing on the engine parts, and it's only lately that we've built this. I think we can call it a nice UI on top of it in the RTC. We want to keep that core, and maybe that's the core that we will be shipping in the first release. And since it's a piece of application, everybody can build their tools on top of it. So I'm not saying that yes, we will ship a replacement for the NDT. It might be the case that we make other tooling vendors able to build something like the NDT, but supported by the infrastructure. I think that's more like it. Yes. Yes. And whenever we make the decision to stop, so the comment was normally it's better to have the new thing in place before you stop the old one. And it's absolutely true. That is what we'd all prefer. And whenever we make the decision to stop an existing tool or an existing whatever before we have a replacement, we know that it's going to be painful. So we don't do it without a reason, right? So, and I think it's just on us to make those decisions, and we have to make those decisions from time to time for various reasons. So, but I acknowledge, and I think we all do, Microsoft acknowledges that is an issue, but we had to make that decision. one last question, or are we? Yeah.
Where will you place this tool license-wise? Will it only be for partners, or will it also be for customers who have bought the application builder, for example?
That's simply too early for me to answer. It'll certainly be for developers and partners, right? Are there scenarios where the customers would use something like this? Yes, that's certainly imaginable. But as I said, it's key to have a responsible developer actually making sure that the merge went well.